Thank you all. We are proud to have wrapped this up. It's been a great privilege for me to work with these leaders to advance what I believe is a positive movement for this state. We've done things that have been meaningful for Tennesseans and they've been an opportunity to serve, and we've done that through this legislative process. It's been a privilege for me to serve with them, and we wanted to let the leaders speak and say a few comments, and then we'll take your questions. So, Leader Johnson.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to point something out that most of you probably know, but everybody on this stage is in a new position except for our Lieutenant Governor, Randy McNally. And I want to first thank him for his steady hand of leadership. He's literally been kind of the rudder of state government for this year as the rest of us kind of find our sea legs. So, Lieutenant Governor, it's an honor and a pleasure to serve with you, and thank you for your leadership. I want to thank my Senate colleagues. It's been I would say a historic session. We've passed landmark legislation benefiting the state. We passed a great budget. Point out that the budget passed in both chambers unanimously, and that starts with the budget that's proposed by the governor. And Governor Lee, you proposed an outstanding budget, and we want to thank you for that. It was a fiscally conservative budget. It put the largest single contribution into our state's rainy day fund, which is our savings account, in the history of the state, bringing that balance up to $1.1 million. It cut taxes. It prioritized the needs of our citizens, and it was a budget that we could have been proud of. And the way the process works, then the legislature takes that budget, we do a deep dive, we do our responsibility to our citizens, and we analyze, we hold budget hearings, and we tweaked it a little bit, and the governor proposed a great budget. We feel like we made it even better, and that's how the process works. So I think the citizens of Tennessee can be proud that we were good stewards of your tax dollars. We prioritized not only your fiscal needs, but also the needs relative to state law. And it's been a very, very successful legislative session. I want to thank my colleagues in the House. It's been a real pleasure working with them. Those who watch this process sometimes may not believe that, but believe it or not, it really is a pleasure. The process sometimes involves a little tension, but that's good. That's the way our framers intended it to be. We're a bicameral legislature, and together I think we came up with a really good legislative session. So thanks to all my colleagues, and we look forward to next year.
Governor, Leader, Speakers, Chairman, I just want to say and just echo what has already been said. I mean, it has been a phenomenal year. And I want to point out that we stand here on the stage today on May 2nd. And even as late as probably this morning, many of you gathered in this room probably doubted that we would be able to adjourn quite this quickly this session. And efficiency does not always equal quality, but in this particular session, it absolutely did. And Governor Lee, I want to applaud you again for setting us off on the right track. You set forth a legislative package this year that invested $6.5 billion in education, that reset our sights back on vocational education, that really began a foundation for true criminal justice reform. I'm confident that this governor, who ran on criminal justice reform, who ran on investment education, who ran on a conservative budget and principles to govern their state, that we all joined in, over the next 7 years will certainly finish that job and continue on really the foundation we have laid this year. So it has been an extraordinary honor, and it is very humbling for me to be able to stand on the stage with these gentlemen and just play a small role in this process. All of our House members, both Republicans and Democrats, we do have spirited debates. We do have stark differences sometimes in the way that we look at some of these issues. But everyone on this stage and each member of each chamber truly, truly believes in the greatness of this state. And so this year, I think it has been a very efficient year. I think we can all agree it has been a very successful year. And that's not just in the budget, but that's in all the bills that passed, and even many of those that failed or were altered from the original form. So thank you all for covering that. I know we're going to take questions in a moment, but just wanted to say it's been an honor to serve with these gentlemen and an honor to serve this great state. Thank y'all.
Questions? Well, the Education Savings Account bill came together because of the willingness of people and leaders to come together and to agree upon what's the best way forward, what would be included, what wouldn't be included, what direction should we go for the betterment of the state. And that's why this process is a good one. There's agreement, there's conversation, and then there's a final resolution, and that's what we did, and I'm excited about it. I'm grateful that we got it done. The children of Tennessee, particularly those that are going to qualify for this program, are going to have access to a high-quality education that they didn't have access to before. And for me, that's success, and I'm grateful for that.
As the ESA bill was approved, there were several questions about components of it, including the legality over a provision related to who would be eligible to receive it. Another one was about limiting it to Davidson and Shelby County. Are you concerned that this legislation might be sued in some capacity?
Well, I'm most concerned about the kids in this state that don't have access to education, which is why I'm grateful that to quality education, which is why I'm grateful this is going forward. And we did a strong job, the legal team did, in constructing this bill so that it would comply with federal law and state law, so we feel good about that.
Governor, you signed the voter registration penalties bill, the target bill today, and immediately a number of groups have filed suit over that. I want to get your thinking on why you signed that and what your thoughts are on defending the law.
Yeah. We need to encourage Tennesseans to vote. We need to encourage as many people as we can to engage in the democratic process, and we need to do whatever we can to do that. This bill was presented because of actual circumstances that were meant to confuse the integrity or to create a lack of integrity in the voting process, and that's why the bill was presented. I think we want to provide for fair, for genuine, for elections with integrity, and that's why I signed the bill.
Senator Block Grant is headed your way, passed in the Senate and House after 2 conference meetings. Are you coming to sign this measure?
I do. I plan to sign that measure.
Are you worried that the state could potentially receive less money in the upcoming years?
Oh, I think that we would never create or never negotiate a deal with the federal government that would be bad for Tennessee. This will allow us to have the opportunity to negotiate, to pursue a correction to a system that's broken. I've said many times the healthcare system is broken. It does not work well, and we want to create a system that does in our state, that lowers the cost of healthcare to Tennesseans. We have that opportunity in negotiating with the federal government through a block grant, and we'll only do it if it's a good deal for Tennesseans, a good deal for our state. It protects the things that we want to be protected, and that will happen in that negotiation process, or we won't get a deal.
On this concealed carry bill that was passed in the Senate today, are you going to sign that? I mean, it only requires you to watch a video and take a short test with no firearms training.
Yeah.
Will you sign that?
Yeah, I will sign that bill.
Are you not concerned that people will be getting a permit who've never had any firearms training?
I think that the law and the new law will require the appropriate measures in order for folks to carry a firearm in Tennessee.
Is there any legislation out there that you're considering vetoing?
No, there's not.
Well, that's a practice that has happened for decades, and I was kind of confused why all of a sudden it was an issue today. And matter of fact, when the Democrats were in charge, it was uncommon for a Republican to be on there. So I'm kind of surprised for the question why this year you find it unusual. It only happened like 2 times. There's certain, it worked out that way, and it's been very fair for the first time in probably 50 years. Democrat or Republican, we have Democrats chairing committees. That's never happened when Democrats were in charge. So the Republican House, we work with the other side and work with them better than they have ever worked with us.
Speaker Cassidy, that would go off a little bit more.
state law is very clear. You have been elected to be in there. If you shirk your responsibilities, several of the actions that can be taken is state troopers can bring you back in there. You are not allowed to leave. And it was a serious offense what they did. It hasn't been done in many, many years, probably back since the Civil War. And it cannot be taken lightly. To walk out, shirk your constitutional responsibilities, that should scare everybody in here. There were several Republicans and Democrats excused. Quite a bit of difference.
3 weren't excused, that were Republicans that were not.
Right. So it's common to be excused. You come and so Republicans and Democrats ask to be excused because of family relationships. That's not uncommon, and y'all know that.
Generally, can you talk about the session, especially in the House, was kind of filled with chaos. I mean, there were protests all over. One member faced an ethics investigation. There were repeated calls for, action on another lawmaker who you later removed from committee. Is the House in shambles right now?
Actually, I would submit it's just the opposite, gentlemen. We got done our business done quite efficiently, quite well. I would say the House hasn't been run better in the past 50 years. So I totally disagree with that assessment. Totally.
During the situation, the ruckus, wasn't the House in recess?
We had come back in. I don't know if you saw, but I stood up and said we're back in session.
Said you're back in. Did
Yeah.
you go up there and physically restrain people, block the door so they couldn't get out?
I did not physically restrain. I'm not a big guy.
You locked the door.
I did not. I had the Sergeant of Arms to start the process of locking the doors so we could all sit down and do the people's business. Obviously, some members of the House want to shirk their constitutional responsibility. It's been given to them by the voters. So I stood at the back doors and said, don't leave. That was what I did.
So your constitutional understanding that the Republicans had their quorum. I mean, you could have had 66 members without the Democrats.
We could.
Why try to get the Democrats and engage in this back and forth with them?
This is a sacred duty and obligation that's been given to some of those members. They chose to turn their back on the responsibility that has been given to them. I find that as an offense, and you all should be offended by that.
Governor Lee, I had a question about the sports betting bill. In a state that really does not look to expand gambling very much at all, they don't have any casinos. Took a while to get the lottery up in place. How did this come from a point where the bill didn't seem like it had a great chance from the outset to you had to make a decision on what to do with it? What was your thinking there?
Well, the only thought I had was whether or not to sign it and support it. And I didn't sign the bill, knowing that it would go into law. I've said all along that I was opposed to expanding gambling in the state, but the legislature felt otherwise, and that's why the bill made it through, and I made the decision to let it go into law.
Is that going to be sort of a practice of yours going forward, that when you're dealing with the legislature, you're not going to try to deter them from doing things, or, I mean, governors traditionally, I know that the legislature is blessed by God and everything else, but occasionally they do have their enthusiasms, and governors have been known to try to stop them and block them from doing certain things. You're not going to do that at all?
You know what?
Let them have their head and let them run.
You know, I've enjoyed in my first session a great opportunity to work with these leaders in the legislature and with members of both sides. And Lieutenant Governor McNally and Speaker Cassada have, and our team have worked together, and that's my goal, is to work with them to get things done.
So I'm not sure I heard an answer to my question there.
Well, I'm not sure what your question really was.
Sometimes serve as brakes on things and say, no, I'm opposed to this. I don't think we should do it.
Well, we certainly communicate with each other on a regular basis how I feel about legislation, and that's part of the process of working together.
You ever mind to say something on that?
Yeah.
Just as the two leaders here, sorry, I need to go to the mic, I guess.
Just as the two leaders up here that actually sponsored the governor's legislation, I got a question early on, and this may kind of highlight the question you're asking. We sponsored the governor's legislation, the administrative package, and a member early on had an idea to change that bill. They wanted to amend it, and they came to me kind of apologetically and said, I hate to amend a governor's bill. And I called the governor's office and his staff, and they said, well, why on earth would they mind amending the bill? Just because it's a governor's bill doesn't mean it's perfect. And I will tell you that that has been the process throughout the year, both with the governor's office and us, in working through legislation, is that no bill is perfect, and everyone is invited to the table. And I can tell you, I've seen just a stark contrast, and it's not better or worse than the previous administration, but a real stark contrast with Governor Lee, in that he invited in a lot of input from the legislature, and we reciprocated and wanted and desired that input from the executive branch. So I think it's been an extraordinarily smooth session, and that's really contributed to a lot of it. It's just a back and forth with the executive branch to try to work through these issues. Doesn't mean we always agree, but at least a good, robust back and forth, and that's it's been very welcome. So,
Lieutenant Governor, you made an unusual move today, I believe, to post on social media that the House should take action on this piece of legislation related to I think, child rape victims.
Right.
Can you explain the thinking behind goading the other chamber into action, and is that something you plan on doing in the future?
Well, I wasn't goading them. I was simply expressing my feelings, and it was something that I felt very strongly about. Senator Gresham and I and Representative Dunn had worked very hard on it, so it wasn't one chamber against the other. It was simply me expressing my feelings and as to why that legislation should be supported and enacted. And something on the governor, I think, governors can kind of work with you on the back end and veto things and then get the legislature to try to stop the veto override. But I think with this governor, he's been very upfront in working with the legislature from the beginning. And we'll, in turn, it's very easy for us to work with him. He's got a great team, and it's just, there are people there that are real easy to work with, and we find common ground on issues.
On that block grant bill, the conference committee report, the first one, Representative Hakeem had a minority report. That would have had to have been voted on first, but then apparently things just fell apart. Either, it doesn't matter who answers, but were Republicans on the committee concerned that they might, or were you concerned that they might have to vote on his request for Medicaid expansion? You might wind up supporting it.
Well, to be quite honest with you, we had no idea what the minority report was because they didn't share it with us, so we didn't know what was in the minority report. What I could say is the House and the Senate had a different opinion in the majority report that was offered on words of must or may or shall, and so that was what was the reason the House differed with the Senate on the majority report. And when that happened, then there was nothing left to be done. We never even heard what was in the minority report or saw the language of the minority report. So for us to express any opinion on it would be out of base because we wouldn't know what was in it.
Speaker Cassidy, I know your office released a statement today. Do you care to offer a word of support? Your chief of staff released that he might have sent some less than savory text messages about African Americans. I don't know if you wanted to address it.
Let me say what I'm most disappointed in is that a story was ran on one of the major stations in this town by an individual that has worked many years in this town that is absolutely false. We received that email from Justin Jones March 1st. It's verified, it's validated, and that reputable news station chose to run a story that was not true. That is sad. That's what I've worked 10 years with my chief of staff. We've left Nashville at 5 in the morning and worked till midnight, traveling the state for almost 10 years. I've never in those 10 years seen any kind of racist or bigoted action out of him. And so if an individual is willing to run a story that's not true about receiving emails, what else are they making up? So I stand by my chief of staff on his character because I know his character.
Speaker Cassidy, you were on one of the text messages. Do you have any recollection of that?
Let me tell you, if I had received that text message, I would strongly scold whoever sent that to me. I never saw that text message, and if I ever see that, I will strongly put whoever sends that to me in their place. Again, it kind of verifies in my mind there's something not right about that story.
We need to move to final legislative questions. We'll do final 2 questions. Any other team?
Nope. Sure, I'll go one more. Governor Lee, perhaps a moment for some reflection. What did you learn about the legislative process?
Oh, my.
Wait, when did I learn about the legislative process?
What did you learn in the course of this session that was perhaps different than you had anticipated coming into the job without having previously held office?
Or when?
I was asked many times on the campaign trail, in part due to my lack of experience in politics and government in general, coming from the outside, how are you going to work with this unruly legislature? And
that's being done.
no, and that was the question. And so what I've learned is that the men and women that make up Tennessee's legislature are people who have sacrificed a lot to be citizen legislators and to come here and to serve. And my heart's to serve Tennesseans. Their heart is to serve Tennesseans. And I've been it's been a pleasant revelation to see the commitment of folks to genuinely work together on both sides of the aisle, but to work together to advance what I think and what we all think is good for Tennesseans. I have very much appreciated it and been honored to work with them, and I don't say that lightly. There's a lot of work that goes on here. It's a very complicated process. There's a lot of late nights and a lot of early mornings, and these folks work really, really hard, and their heart is to improve the lives of Tennesseans, and that's mine, and I've been proud to experience that myself for the first time, and proud to be part of it.
So final question.
I had a question for the speakers and the majority leaders. So what happened on the bill that would have, on the per diem, the one that would have just dramatically increased your campaign contributions? What happened?
I'm happy to start with that. The number of things we were looking at there relative to campaign contribution limits. There are some in our respective caucuses that say there shouldn't be any limits as long as everything is fully disclosed, and others that say that there should be limits, but the limits relative to the House and the Senate, and when those limits are reset, that there is some kind of murky ground there. And so, we weren't able to come to terms on it. It's something we will continue to look at. But one of the problems you have with some of those items is that they're kind of set, and they don't necessarily escalate, or again, relative to the House contributions limits and then the Senate contribution limits. So we'll carry it on. We'll talk about it some more over the summer and the fall, and we'll bring it back. It was, we had legislation filed, but it just wasn't its time, and so I think we'll need to have more conversations about it.
Sorry, I'm going to follow up on the last question. I think it was the last question, anyways. I never saw an actual bill that matched that description, but I know there was some conversation about that. And late in the session, there's a lot of amendments that try to get added to bills. There's a lot of stuff that goes into conference committee reports, and I think that's a larger conversation that probably needs to start afresh with a bill that goes through the committee system and everything else. And so I didn't actually see a bill that matched that description, but at the same time, I think that conversation is a healthy one to have, especially with the contribution limits. But it probably needs to go through the full committee system. And there were a lot of things here at the last couple of days that got added in amendments and everything else, but most of those were smaller, kind of what I would refer to as kind of fix-it amendments that clarified the language. So that's a large conversation, and one I'm sure we'll take up next year.
Thank y'all.
Do it again.